If you've ever said, I know I'm supposed to be doing more, but couldn't figure out why your job feels off, this episode is for you because the problem isn't you, it's the mismatch between how you think and the kind of work you've been handed. So, hey, my name is Marthea Pitts, the MSW coach, and I'm back for another episode of my podcast, Macro Social Work Your Way. Today, I want to name something that I see all the time in social workers I talk to, and honestly, it's something that I lived through myself. I call it the micro macro mismatch. And once you hear what that really means, you're going to realize you've been feeling it for a long time. You just didn't have the language for it, right? And so, um, here's what I mean by micro macro mismatch. Micro work. So anytime you hear me use the word micro or hear me use the term case management, is all one and the same, right? So micro work, which typically looks like for social workers, case management, you may refer to it as direct practice, you may refer to it as what else? I sometimes refer to it as frontline work, one-on work directly with clients, right? But for me, I encompass all types of one-on-one social work as case management. So that includes clinical therapists, that includes my school social workers, that includes my medical social workers, that includes social workers who work in the justice system, that includes social workers who work as school counselor, as school social workers who it doesn't matter where you work. You could work on an employee assistance hotline. You are who I'm talking to. And so again, I always group all of us in case management anytime you're doing one-on-one type work with clients, right? So with micro work is focused on task completion. And what I mean by that is it's about to do the thing, right? How to submit the referral, how to triage the crises, how to document the call. And so when it comes to micro work, you essentially can be trained to do that. Because the reality is, let me pause for a moment, put on my workforce development hat. The reality is that a lot of social workers are in jobs that are specifically for social service workers. So, a social service job is a job that is open to anyone that lives in the surrounding community to the community-based organization, right? However, you see an overabundance of social workers in those jobs, which also leads to the fact of like over credentialing, meaning you see a lot of social workers in social service jobs that don't require any like specialized credentials, any specific licensures, certifications, trainings. It's because those jobs are really designed for the people that live in the community who may or may not have like anything over and beyond a high school diploma. And truth be told, some social service agencies don't even require a high school diploma. I'm not even gonna go on a tangent because I was gonna refer to like the city where I used to live. City government got rid of the high school diploma requirement years ago under the leadership of one of our former mayors. So what happens is you see an overabundance of social workers in these micro jobs that are very task completion focused, right? However, on the other side of our profession, micro work, which I'll define for the sake of this conversation today as systems change work, but macro level work. One is not just exclusive to social workers. All professions do macro level work. All professions do micro level work. All professions do meso level work. However, in social work, you hear it exclusively called macro social work, right? But for the sake of this conversation today, I'm just going to say macro work. And for the sake of this conversation today, I'm just going to define it simplistically as systems change work. However, macro level work can look many different ways for a social worker based on their specific interests, experiences, and like alignment with the populations and issues that you like go hard for, right? So macro work is systems change work, and systems change work is focused more on ideas rather than task, right? So macro work is about asking why things are happening the way they are and what could actually change them long term, right? So in the words of one of my coaching clients, she was like, and she was going through my career coaching program, the micro to macro career accelerator. And she was like, essentially, we are as macro social workers trying to work ourselves out of a job. Like you're trying to fix the problem so you eventually don't have to have a job. And I was like, yeah, that's the perfect way to explain it. So macro work focuses on the systems. They focus on changing the systems. And in order to do that, that work is heavily reliant on ideas, right? But what happens when you're someone who thinks in the term of systems, right? And you're very focused on solving for root causes and you naturally spot inefficiencies like in your day-to-day just moving in the world, but specifically in your day-to-day work as a case manager, um, you can end up feeling like you're stuck in those frontline jobs that only give you tools to patch up the issue for today, right? So what I see is like common language among case managers who really should be doing macro level work. Is like, I feel like I'm putting a band-aid on the problem. I feel like there's a conversation that's not being had in the rooms that I'm in as a case manager. My words are, they feel very disconnected from the scope of work that they are responsible for delivering every day. They're passionate about the populations that they're serving. They're even passionate about the issue that their organization focuses the work on. However, the way the work is done, there is a huge disconnect there, right? And that's what I call the mismatch. It creates this real internal tension, where you don't necessarily feel stuck. You just feel like, again, there's a conversation that's constantly not being had. You are always asking bigger questions. You are always craving more information. Another common thing that I also notice is that these social workers, and this is all things that I've experienced when I was in case management before I pivoted to macro level work, is you are a very wide focused person. So, as we all know, in micro level organizations, typically there's no why given behind the work unless you go out to seek it on your own. And see, I myself, I know I'm an outlier because when I was in those roles, I went out to seek the why behind it. And I actually had a colleague who also was a public administration major, and she would seek out the why. And so, because I was in constant community with another systems thinker, even though we are in this very like stereotypical, I don't know if that's the word, like atypical micro organization where it's like, we are only here to do this. And ain't nobody ask you to do all of that other stuff, because I was so closely connected to my work bestie at the time, who's also a system thinker. I had the opportunity to really nurture like that curiosity that I had. And I'm so thankful for those moments, because then I see the opposite, like contrast to that. I see my coaching clients who are the only ones in their organizations asking these questions and being curious about finding real solutions to the problem. And they have no one to bounce that off of, no one to help nurture that in them. And I really am like, how I show up in my professional life when I'm working in my macro jobs is really because of my early experiences in my case management job and the community that I had around me that was nurturing that. That even includes my former supervisor. for my case management job. That's why in my career coaching program, community is such a major component of my career coaching program because I know firsthand like the value in that in and of itself. So I'm not gonna go on a tangent, but I just really wanted to talk about like when you are the only one, it can be lonely. You can be made to feel at times like you're imagining stuff. You can be made to feel like you are the only one thinking it's a problem. Everything else is fine, right? So I wanted to name that for you, um, because I know it will help someone. So you're always asking the bigger questions. You're always craving more. You're always on a deeper internal level, wanting to understand the why, right? And so most of the social workers I work with didn't realize that those very things making them uncomfortable in their current case management jobs were actually proof that they're already doing macro level work, right? So you're the one everyone comes to when something's broken, not because it's your job, but because you'll figure it out, right? You're the go-to person. You are the solution focused person in a room full of problem focused people, right? And so you're the one who keeps suggesting ways to improve things and only to be met with, that's not in the budget or that's above your pay grade. Or it could be on the opposite end where you have a very supportive supervisor. Again, I had that. I also had coaching clients that have it. In those moments, I teach them how to strategically leverage the support from their case management supervisor to really get the experience under their belt to like propel them into their first macro job. So maybe that does look like you having free reign to create new programs, new services, do beta testing with with your participants and clients, and trying out new ways to serve them. So even the fact that you're bringing forth those ideas is a clear indicator that you are possibly a macro social worker who's in a mismatch organizational setting, meaning you're in a micro setting, right? So if you do take the idea to your supervisor and they're like over the moon excited and they're like, how do you think of this? You're such a genius. That is a sign that you are in a micro organization that is not in alignment like with the way that you think, the way that you operate professionally, right? And so I want to name all of that, specifically like the not so great side of it where you're constantly making suggestions, it's not being entertained, or they pretend to entertain it and then do nothing with it. What could happen and what does happen, and I've seen it with coaching clients in the past, is that over time, this can make you feel like you're burning out, or um, that you are doing something wrong, or that you made some horrible like life decisions about your degree choice and what it could look like. What it could like make you feel is that you're experiencing burnout, or it can make you feel like you should be going back to school to get another degree, right? Or maybe you should completely walk away from the social work profession and look at some other industry or field. And I want to name for you that it's none of those things. And you don't need to do any of those things. What you're actually experiencing is misalignment, right? And so misalignment occurs when you are operating in your zone of what they call competence, right? So zone of competence is basically where like you do things at a high level, right? You're given the tasks, you're given the duties, and you're on point, right? You never miss. You're firing on all cylinders. But the truth is, you're able to operate in that manner because you've been trained to do it. It's what's expected of you, right? And that is what's true in most case management work. Even if you never technically went through a one-on-one type training in your case management job, we all received training preparation, even if it wasn't explicitly for the type of job you're in now, we've all experienced like training preparation from our MSW degree programs, right? You learn about taking case notes and you learn about proper documentation and you learn about establishing rapport with clients and you learn about like program management depending on the design of your program. If you're clinical, you learn about therapeutic techniques and modality, whatever y'all call it, modalities. I'm not clinical, right? But you learn about those things. You're being trained to do them. And so when you are a person who's already a high achiever, which my coaching clients are, you're going to do it. You're going to do it you're going to surpass everyone. However, in that, you are only operating in your zone of competency, right? In your zone of competence, excuse me. But the goal really should be to be operating in your zone of genius, right? And so what this looks like is again little peaks of it. You see it in your case management work where you are doing things that are over and beyond the scope of your work, right? And it's because you do it because you see the whole picture. So you see that over here, I'm just going to make this up, where your organization only specifically talks about housing. They only address the immediate housing needs of your participants. However, you're seeing a recurring theme like these people are coming in and they need some more conversations outside of housing. They need conversations about access to credit. They need conversations about access to transportation. They also need conversations around parenting and K through 12 education and how to advocate for their children in the education system or in the justice system or in the healthcare system, right? So when you do those things, even when you are in a situation where you technically should only be operating in your zone of competency, and you slowly find a way to operate in your zone of genius, right? You're innovating, you see the patterns that others are missing. You speak up even when it's inconvenient to you because you see a thing. That is a sign that you are in a mismatch situation. You are in misalignment. You are not operating fully in your zone of genius. So you have to like steal these moments, these opportunities to do it in a job where you technically should only be doing what you've been trained to do. And this is what causes these phenomenal social workers, depending on again the leadership that you're under, to hit walls where you're being reprimanded. You end up with targets on your back because you always have an idea. You always have something that's like viewed as going against the grain of the organizational scope that you work within. And I just want to say that when you have the opportunity to really like work in your zone of genius full time, like 9 to 5, and you're not having to steal these little moments and still have to do your zone of competency work. There's no better feeling than that. That's what I call alignment. Like, there's no better feeling than being able to work in your zone of genius at all times, right? Where you're getting to be as creative as you want to. You are really addressing the root cause issues. You're being able to be innovative and you're being able to partner with other disciplines and you're being able to have much larger conversations than just the triage type focus work that's done in case management work. Um, and so what I want you to really know is that what you really need instead of another job, another like degree or thinking that you're behind in life or you're experiencing burnout is you really need an opportunity to lead or live in your zone of genius, right? So I have a coaching client. I have a few coaching clients who were managing crisis every day in their case management jobs, but they were quietly developing tools to help staff do the work better, right? This is a common thing that I see with my coaching clients. They didn't know it prior to working with me, but they were already doing macro level work, right? I had a client tell me one time that I thought this was just something I did to help the team. I didn't know it really mattered. And I'm like, that's the issue, right? You've been doing macro level work without the macro title, without the macro pay, because we get paid really, really well for our zone of genius, and without the macro support, right? And so I really want you to say that you've already been doing this work, right? And the things that you feeling are just like the indicators that it's time for you to explore other options to get into an aligned place. So this isn't about like trying to go for a promotion within your internal organization that within the organization that you're already in, because again, the organization that you're in as a micro social worker, the scope in that organization is not focused on macro level work. So even if you get promoted, which I see this a lot with social workers too, is that they go and apply for a team lead position, or they go and apply for a supervisor position or a program manager and a program director position, and they think that it's going to solve that feeling, that the issues that they've been experiencing. But what happens is it just magnifies it. And over time, that's really what shoots them into burnout, because now they're having to constantly just work, pump out in the zone of competency at such a high level rate. Plus, they have all of these other people that they now have to worry about, right? And so, this isn't about getting a promotion. This is about getting aligned. Again, you are not burnt out. You are buried in the fact that you are in this organization that's only focused on micro level work when you really are a systems thinker, right? And so sometimes what I can see happen is social workers will continue to apply for what I call case management adjacent jobs, right? Trying to get this zone of genius like alignment, but they continue to, because they only know how to get one type of job, which is case management job. So they apply for what I call case management adjacent jobs. So what that commonly looks like for social workers is applying for human resource jobs, HR jobs. Social workers are infamous for going after HR job in a pursuit of like getting in a line space and trying to escape case management work because of these things that they're experiencing that I named earlier. So HR jobs. Another is like student affairs type work in higher education. So that can look like things from wanting to be a social work adjunct professor or teacher to wanting to be like anything on the academic, the student affairs side of the house. So that can be an academic advisor. It can be something where you are supporting students in like their student life, right? So I also see a lot of social workers who focus on very like customer support based type roles, right? But most definitely those HR jobs, most definitely higher ed type jobs that I just named. Another thing is too that a lot of social workers who are non-clinical at the time when they are feeling this misalignment, they immediately set their sights on clinical work, right? On the obtaining of clinical licensure and going through that whole process and supervision and taking the tests and doing all of the other things, even though they verbally say out their mouths, I have never been interested in therapeutic work. Right. So it's just like, why are you doing that? And it's because they think that's their only like other option. Right. And so I really want to name for you today that you have other options. Right. And I want you to ask yourself, what would change if you actually worked in your zone of genius? What would be possible if you finally aligned your job with the kind of thinking that you naturally do, right? And so I want to end this conversation by telling you, like, again, you deserve to be in a room where your ideas don't scare people. You deserve to be in a job that values your strategy, not just your production, right? So if any of this sounded like you already have the experience you need. You just need to learn how to reframe it, package, and pitch it to macro employers. And so a great way to start is with my free e-course at macroandpaid.com. It's the best next step to start learning more about what macro social work jobs are, what the scope of work looks like in the different organizations and industries that hire macro social workers, salary ranges, and just how to start mapping out your transition to move into an aligned place in your career. So until next time, happy macro career planning. I'll talk to you later. Bye.